The invoice lay on the polished glass desk. Total due, $1,212. CEO Victoria Ashford barely looked at it before sliding it back across the table. I'm not paying this. The small office inside Ashford Aviation became completely silent. Standing across from her was Daniel Brooks, 41 years old, owner of a neighborhood auto repair garage, single father to an 8-year-old daughter named Sophie. His hands were rough from years of fixing engines. Grease still stained the sleeves of his blue work shirt. He calmly picked up the invoice. May I ask why? Victoria leaned back in her expensive leather chair. Because your bill is ridiculous. You replaced one fuel pump. Daniel nodded. And several damaged fuel lines. I also repaired the electrical fault that prevented the engine from starting. She waved her hand dismissively. It took you 4 hours. It took me 20 years to learn how to fix it in 4 hours. Several executives standing nearby exchanged nervous glances. Victoria wasn't used to people answering her so confidently. I can hire another mechanic for half that. Daniel smiled politely. Then I recommend you do that next time. She frowned. Excuse me. I don't negotiate after the work has been completed. Victoria folded her arms. Neither do I. She tore the invoice in half. Then again, small pieces drifted onto her desk. There. We're done. The room fell silent. Daniel looked down at the shredded paper, then quietly gathered every piece into his tool bag. He never raised his voice, never argued, never threatened legal action. He simply zipped the bag closed. I'll send another copy. Victoria laughed. I'll ignore that one too. Daniel looked directly into her eyes. I hope today's decision is worth $1,200. She smiled confidently. It certainly is. He nodded once. Have a good afternoon. Without another word, he walked out of the office. The receptionist hurried after him. Mr. Brooks. I'm so sorry. Daniel smiled gently. It wasn't your fault. But, aren't you angry? He looked toward the large glass building behind him. No. People reveal themselves when money is involved. Then he climbed into his old pickup truck. The driver's door squeaked loudly as he closed it. Inside the passenger seat sat a pink backpack covered in cartoon stars. 5 minutes later, he parked outside Lincoln Elementary School. As soon as Sophie spotted the truck, she came running across the sidewalk. Daddy. She climbed inside with the biggest smile. Guess what? What? I got an A on my science project. Daniel grinned. I knew you would. She noticed he looked quieter than usual. Bad day. He started the engine. Just a customer who forgot that honesty has value. Sophie tilted her head. Did they yell? A little. Did you yell back? He laughed softly. No. Why not? Because shouting doesn't fix broken people. She smiled. Mom used to say that. Daniel nodded. She did. 3 years earlier, after losing his wife to cancer, Daniel had promised himself that no difficult customer would ever steal the kindness his daughter deserved to see. That promise had become the way he lived. Meanwhile, back at Ashford Aviation, Victoria proudly told her executive team, "That's how you handle people who overcharge." Several managers forced awkward smiles. Only one person dared to speak. The company's chief engineer quietly cleared his throat. "Ma'am." "Yes. Daniel Brooks isn't just any mechanic." She looked up. "What do you mean?" "He rebuilt the prototype engine that saved this company's racing division 8 years ago." Victoria shrugged. "So, he refused publicity. He preferred staying independent." She looked unimpressed. "That still doesn't justify $1,200. The engineer hesitated before adding. "His repair probably prevented over $50,000 in additional damage." Victoria closed her laptop. The discussion is over. That evening, Daniel returned to his modest repair shop. The building wasn't impressive. Old brick walls. A faded sign. Free service bays. But every customer who walked through those doors knew one thing. Daniel never charged for work that wasn't needed. His honesty had built the business. Not flashy advertisements. Not expensive equipment. Just trust. As he finished closing for the night, an elderly man quietly walked into the garage. His luxury sedan had broken down just outside. Daniel smiled. "We're actually closed." The man apologized. "I'm sorry. I don't know who else to call." Daniel looked at the darkening sky, then at the tired expression on the stranger's face. Without hesitation, he reopened the garage. "Let's take a look." Within 30 minutes, the car was running perfectly. The elderly gentleman reached for his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" Daniel smiled. "Nothing. You've had a long day." Just drive home safely. The man looked surprised. Are you sure? I'm sure. The stranger studied Daniel carefully before asking, what if I insist? Daniel laughed. Then donate it to someone who needs it more than I do. The elderly man slowly smiled. He thanked Daniel, shook his hand, and quietly drove away. Daniel never asked his name. He had no idea that the man he'd just helped for free was Charles Ashford, the billionaire founder of Ashford Aviation and Victoria's father. Within 12 hours, Charles would learn exactly how his daughter had treated the mechanic who had refused to take a single dollar from him. And before the next sunset, one handwritten check would change both of their lives forever. The next morning began like any other. Daniel unlocked the garage before sunrise. He brewed a pot of coffee, turned on the lights, checked the day's appointments. Nothing suggested his life was about to change. At 8 o'clock, a long line of black luxury vehicles slowly pulled into the parking lot. Customers waiting outside stopped talking. Employees looked through the garage windows. Daniel walked outside, wiping grease from his hands with an old shop towel. The rear door of the first sedan opened. The elderly man from the night before stepped out. This time he wasn't alone. Several executives followed him. Among them stood Victoria Ashford. She looked nothing like the confident CEO from the previous afternoon. Her expression was tense, almost nervous. Daniel smiled politely. Good morning. The elderly gentleman extended his hand. My name is Charles Ashford. Daniel shook it. It's nice to meet you properly. Charles looked around the small garage. So this is your shop? It is. I owe you an apology. Daniel looked confused. You don't owe me anything. Charles slowly turned toward his daughter. Victoria, you do. She stepped forward. For several seconds, she couldn't meet Daniel's eyes. Finally, she spoke. I'm sorry. I refused to pay you. I judged you before I even looked at your work. Daniel nodded quietly. I appreciate the apology. Charles reached into his jacket. I also reviewed the repair invoice. He held up a fresh copy. I spoke with 3 independent engineers this morning. They all told me the same thing. Daniel waited. They said your bill should have been higher. Victoria lowered her head. Charles continued. You prevented catastrophic engine failure. You charged less than most specialists would have. Then he removed a checkbook. Everyone in the garage watched silently. Charles carefully wrote several numbers, signed his name, tore out the check, and handed it to Daniel. Daniel glanced down. His eyes widened. $12 million? There must be a mistake. Charles smiled. There isn't. Daniel immediately shook his head. I can't accept this. Charles expected that answer. I know. That's exactly why you deserve it. Daniel looked confused. Charles explained. Last night, after you repaired my car, you refused to charge me. You told me to donate the money to someone who needed it more. Daniel smiled. I remember. I've spent 40 years building businesses. I've met brilliant people, talented people, ambitious people, but integrity like yours is rare. The garage became completely silent. Charles continued. I'm not paying you for fixing my car. I'm investing in the kind of person I wish every company could hire. Daniel looked at the enormous check again. I still don't understand. Charles smiled. I've decided to fund your dream. What dream? I asked around this morning. I learned you've spent years training young mechanics after work. You've been repairing vehicles for struggling single parents at little or no cost. You've quietly helped dozens of families. Daniel shrugged modestly. They needed reliable transportation. Charles nodded. And now you'll have the resources to help thousands. He unfolded several documents. The money will establish the Brooks Technical Academy, free vocational education, scholarships, single-parent assistance, modern training facilities. You'll run it. Daniel stood speechless. Across the parking lot, reporters had begun arriving after hearing that Charles Ashford was visiting the small garage. Television cameras pointed toward the scene. One reporter shouted, Mr. Ashford, why give $12 million to a local mechanic? Charles answered without hesitation. Because character is the most valuable investment I've ever found. Every news channel carried the story that afternoon. But the biggest surprise came during Charles's press conference. Standing beside Daniel, he looked toward Victoria. My daughter made a serious mistake. Victoria stepped forward before anyone could ask a question. She faced the cameras herself. I judge someone by their clothes, the size of their business, and the condition of their garage. I never judge the quality of his work. She looked directly at Daniel. I'm grateful you showed more professionalism than I showed you. Daniel smiled gently. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them. Over the following year, construction began on the Brooks Technical Academy. Young people who couldn't afford trade school received scholarships. Single parents learned mechanical skills while free childcare was provided on-site. Veterans found new careers. Former students returned as instructors. The waiting list grew longer every month. Victoria often visited the academy, not as the CEO giving orders, as a volunteer mentor. She quietly funded additional scholarships without seeking publicity. One afternoon, while watching students rebuild engines, she asked Daniel, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd simply paid the $1,212? Daniel laughed softly. I probably would have gone home and forgotten about it. She smiled. So refusing to pay became the most expensive decision of my career. Daniel shook his head. No, it became the most valuable lesson. Years later, the academy celebrated graduating its 10,000th student. Many had gone on to open repair shops, support their families, create businesses of their own. At the ceremony, Charles Ashford addressed the audience one final time. I've invested in factories, technology, real estate, but none of those investments ever produced returns like this. He pointed toward the graduates. This is what happens when opportunity meets integrity. After the applause ended, a young student asked Daniel, "What's the secret to your success?" Daniel smiled. It wasn't the $12 million check. It wasn't luck. It was deciding that my values would never depend on how someone else treated me. He looked across the crowd and spotted Sophie, now a confident teenager, helping younger children during the celebration. She smiled proudly at her father. In that moment, Daniel realized the greatest reward had never been the money. It was knowing his daughter had grown up watching him respond to disrespect with dignity, to unfairness with honesty, and to opportunity with generosity. The check changed his future, but his character had earned it long before anyone wrote the first number. And that was the lesson every graduate carried with them as they stepped into their own future, that the richest people are not always those with the largest bank accounts, but those whose integrity remains priceless even when no one is watching.